And joining me now is Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, in some of these races, including tonight in the state of Florida, you've got candidates voting, but you have actually backed some candidates who are running against your own colleagues. One example, Illinois, you endorsed the Republican candidate Darren Bailey over the sitting Republican there, Mike Bost. Bost was endorsed by Trump. Not good enough for you?
Well, I think I made my endorsement before the president did in that race, and no two people see every question the same way. But I think one thing we're learning from the results tonight is that there is no force more powerful in Republican politics than the endorsement of President Trump. Bernie Moreno outperforming all of the polling and other Trump-endorsed candidates doing very well across the board. I think it portends to a real unification of the Republican Party heading into the general election.
Why are you fighting against your own colleagues? Speaker Johnson has argued that you shouldn't, and that not just you specifically, but you and other colleagues.
Yeah, I've had many conversations with Speaker Johnson, and he says, Matt, we can't run the plays you want to run because we don't have the players that will back them. And so I'm trying to improve the players. And there are a few circumstances around the country. I think Brandon Herrera would be an improvement over Tony Gonzalez, where if you have a challenger prevail over the incumbent, it not only changes the dynamics in that seat, it changes the whole ecosystem in the Republican conference, where maybe people are willing to be more bold, more daring, and embrace a lot of the process reforms that I wanted, like single subject spending bills and downward pressure on overall federal spending.
It does seem that Mike Johnson disagrees with the candidates here. I mean, he seems to think that it's not the best thing to run against people who are already in the Congress. You told my colleague Manu Raju, at the end of the day, we're not judged by how many Republicans we have in Congress. We're judged on whether or not we save the country. I mean, don't you need a majority in Congress in order to save the country, if that's what you're after?
Yeah, a majority is necessary but not sufficient, right? Because if what we have is a majority of people who by the dozens will vote with Democrats for higher spending, for these trillion-dollar spending bills with disparate subjects connected to one another, then it becomes hard to distinguish a Republican majority from a Democrat majority.
But if you have a minority, you don't even get to set the agenda. You're just responding to
it sort of feels a lot like how things are right now, because if I were setting the agenda, we would be taking these federal agencies one at a time. We wouldn't be mashing them together in a minibus. So again, I want us to have a majority. I'm not saying that that's not a laudable goal, but it has to be a majority of people willing to fight. And look, I admire what the squad did in the Democratic conference. At first, there was like 4 of them. Now I look over there and everybody wants to be like the squad. So there's a way a small group of people connected with the base voters in a political party can influence the rest of the legislative body and conference.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because, I mean, when Nancy Pelosi had a very narrow majority, those very members of the squad, they voted with their party. They didn't throw a big fight every time that there was a spending bill. They were pretty united. Republicans,
well, they got their way, Abby.
Well, Republicans look at what they got. Not be able to do that.
Yeah, but look at what the squad got. They got basically the progressive plan to become the Biden plan on the American Rescue Plan and a lot of the post-COVID era funding bills. And so they were able to draw their conference closer to their viewpoint. That's what I'm trying to do. I want the Republican conference to be more America first in its worldview and more focused on downward pressure on spending here at home.
So right now, Speaker Johnson has come up with a deal with the White House and with the Senate to fund the government. And this bill is, to put it nicely, being panned by some of your colleagues. Just listen to what some of them had to say.
This minibus is worse than the other. Look, this country's in trouble. I don't know when we're going to start facing it.
Same song, second verse.
I've been very clear. I think that the government should actually secure its borders before we start talking about government funding. That's been my position.
I know viewers have been paying attention because we've been covering it. We've had you on the show multiple times. It sounds like deja vu. I mean, this is your hand-picked speaker. Are you resigned now that this is just the way it's going to work, whether or not the speaker is Kevin McCarthy or Mike Johnson?
I'm always more hopeful for Mike Johnson, but let's remember Kevin McCarthy had a 4-seat majority. Mike Johnson's down to a 1-seat majority on some days, and so it's a different standard that I think you have to judge them by. But the answer to this last question is really your first question. When you ask me about challenging incumbents around the country, my colleagues who just spoke there are right in their criticism of this bill, and they're right that the current Republican majority is all too willing to just be the uniparty with the Democrats and fund the government in the absence of our requirements to secure the border and to lead to some semblance of balance in the federal budget. So, yeah, just changing the speaker isn't going to do it. Necessary but not sufficient. In order to achieve my goals, I'm going to have a different group of people in the Congress. That's why I'm trying to get different and better people.
Are you disappointed in the speaker?
I would have hoped for more, and frankly, I think he would have as well. When I think about how Mike Johnson campaigned for the job of Speaker, he sounded a lot more like I do, right? But upon getting the job, I think he's been drawn into some of the ways of Washington that lead us on a suboptimal path. I like Mike Johnson. He's a friend. We communicate on an almost daily basis. And I hope to give Mike Johnson a better team so that when he is the Speaker in the 119th Congress, we're able to fulfill his conservative policy ambitions.
I want to ask you about Donald Trump because this week he told the court that he could not get any underwriters to help him pay his more than $400 million bond. If no underwriters are willing to back him on this, why should voters?
Well, because underwriters have to make a financial decision about the New York court system. That's not a bet that voters have to make, right? Voters are making a bet based on their own economic condition, whether or not we live in a safer world. And I think we're going to be pitching peace and prosperity. Biden's going to be pitching, a lot of danger and unsafety.
The fact that he's not able to get anyone to help him out here seems to suggest that they don't trust him to be good for this money.
Well, no, I think it means that they're not certain in a successful appeal in the New York legal system. I go ask people for a vote all the time, and I probably wouldn't be bondable at $500 million either, right? And so I think in this case, you've got a weaponized system that, even Kevin O'Leary is out there saying that with Tish James pursuing this civil matter in the absence of a real complainant or a real business loss, it's making things worse for New York, and it's a real perversion of the law.
A lot of people disagree with Kevin O'Leary on that one, but I want to ask you this. A conservative broadcaster, Mark Levin, he wrote this: why are there no Republican multi-billionaires offering to lend President Trump the funds to file his appeal in this outrageous case in New York State, and none of them liquid enough to help or join with the others to help? It's an outrage, he says. Do you agree? Should some of these multi-billionaires come and swoop in and bail out Trump?
I don't know. This is not something I'm quite familiar with. I think that President Trump has to be able to assemble the assets in order to post the bond, and I suspect that he will, because if he doesn't, you're going to start to see Tish James foreclose on those assets. And so I think that you have to have the right mix of collateral and cash. And that already was a challenge for the first bond, and I think it's even more of a challenge.
Do you think that some of these really wealthy people who support former President Trump should be willing to help him here?
Well, that's not something I'm familiar with. When you speak to me about the life of a multi-billionaire, it's not really something I have great association with. I don't know what it would ever be like to have that amount of money and what it would be like to bet it on the appellate court system in New York.
Well, one last thing on Trump and his legal woes. Right now, the RNC has said that they want to help him pay for his legal bills. His leadership PAC has spent more than $55 million just on legal bills. That's 85% of its spending. Are you comfortable with that?
No, I wish he weren't being attacked like this. Trump is up in your polling.
But he is. Are you comfortable with his leadership PAC using the money that's being raised from ordinary people in a lot of cases to pay his legal bills?
Yeah, it's a necessity. Your network covers ad nauseum that this money is used for this purpose, and yet it continues to be contributed for people who believe that President Trump is under siege. And so I think that we have to view the fusion of the criminal justice system and this presidential campaign as something that we have to combat with every force we have at the RNC and President Trump's campaign and with our own donations. And, it does make me think, how much further ahead of Biden would we be if we weren't having to fight not only on the political front, but on the civil front, on the criminal front, and seemingly everywhere else?
One way to avoid that would be to not get into legal trouble, which Trump seems to be doing
these
all
are
the
such
time.
novel legal theories that oftentimes are woven together in ways that have never been applied against other people. Look at the Alvin Bragg case that's about to go to trial.
Because nobody has ever done what Trump is alleged to have done doesn't mean that he shouldn't be held accountable.
Well, but you see similar conduct not treated the same way.
I want to move on just quickly because you heard us talking to Leader Jeffries about Trump's comments about Jewish people who vote for Democrats, which is a huge majority of American Jews in this country. Why does he keep saying things like this, questioning the loyalty of American Jewish people just because of who they vote for?
Yeah, I think he does it so that you'll carry it, right? I think with Trump, he's making an argument about how his policies were better for Israel, and he knows if he does so in the most stark terms, that's what it's going to have you and me talking about.
Isn't that dangerous at a time when Jewish people in America are facing really unprecedented levels of threats right now?
Well, I think the Jewish people facing the most threats right now are the ones in Israel. And they were living better lives when Donald Trump was president, and our adversaries, were not on the march against our great allies.
When it comes to Trump's comments about American Jews, why does he keep saying things like this? It's not the first time, or the second time, or the third time.
My sense is that he's saying these things because he wants to draw attention to what he did in the Golan Heights. He wants to draw attention to the Abraham Accords.
And you're comfortable
all
with
of those
that?
policy reforms. Yeah, I don't give the president rhetorical advice. He's far more gifted in that regard than I am.
So you are comfortable with him using this kind of rhetoric?
Yeah, I'm not given any discomfort by the rhetoric he's used to draw attention to what he did for Israel.
All right. Congressman Matt Gaetz, thank you very much. Good to have you in the studio tonight.